Hello everybody, Dokkan Assets here. Today we are back with another animation analysis video. And ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to be taking a look at the brand new LR Babidi, LR Majin Vegeta, LR Mr. Buu. I guess technically Fat Buu at this point because he's not Good Buu yet. This card covers basically like half the Majin Buu saga in one card, to be fair. I guess the whole arc does take place within like the span of basically a day or so. So, we're going to be taking a look at this guy's animations. This is going to be an interesting one because obviously when we go into a card like this, right, that is not a traditional Dokkan Fest or Dokkan Fest LR or summonable LR unit, we kind of have to change our lens a little bit because obviously when it comes to this sort of thing, we have to, of course, keep in mind that because this is a free-to-play unit, the super attacks are not necessarily going to be as crazy or as high quality in some areas as the normal animations that we'd be taking a look at. However, I will say these are quite good for being a free-to-play unit. I will say, I mean, to be fair, free-to-play essays have been, pretty good for quite some time now when it comes to Dokkan animations, and have only been getting better over time. So, as per usual, let's go ahead and take a look at this all the way through, and then we will hit it with the frame-by-frame action. By the way, of course, shout out to Dokkan World for this upload. I know I did upload these essays as well, but I did upload them from the Dokkan Wiki, and the animations that they take, they kind of just try and piece the assets together. So this is everything in full, and I think it's just better to look at it this way so we can get a better idea of what we're looking at here. So, of course, link to this in the description below, and as always, thank you, Dokkan World, for letting me use your videos for this. Anyhow, let's go ahead and get into it. By the way, as per usual, I always do like to say when it comes to these videos, I am no means a professional animation man. By the way, sorry, the audio was on for the desktop there. But when it comes to this sort of thing, I always think I have a pretty decent grasp of Dokkan animations and whatnot. Speaking of which, holy cow, this card art is fire. Just wanted to throw it in the video because obviously, it's super sick. They absolutely popped off with the card art for this guy. But yeah, I just think I have a pretty decent idea of what makes a Dokkan animation pretty good. So, I like to take a decent sort of analyze them for fun. By the way, so many cool things already in the Babidi animations. When I saw the 18 key, I was actually very impressed. The 12 key for this? Ooh, I don't know about all that. But the 18 key is absolutely fantastic, if I do say so myself. They definitely knocked it out of the park with that one. We'll take a look at the small details in a moment. So this is also kind of interesting. Obviously, this is the standby skill, right? Where it transfers into Vegeta. His hair is way too short there. I'm sure it's because they styled that more like the manga rather than the anime. Unfortunately, I haven't seen any other comparisons, by the way, for this one. So even if I wanted to, I couldn't compare this to the animations from the anime. Cool card art for Vegeta as well. Yeah, it's interesting to me that they reuse the same thing for the standby skill, right? They reused it here for this with Vegeta being introduced. Obviously, this part is different where he obviously attacks the building, right? And does the little kaboom to all of the citizens. It's also kind of weird that they had this be a building. I just noticed that because obviously he blasts the World Tournament stand. I guess it's maybe supposed to be like the back of it or something like that. Interesting. And then obviously for the finish skill, right, we have the fully charged one. And this is kind of interesting because Buu is here and Majin Vegeta just isn't. They basically just like remove him from the super attacks. Which is so funny because technically I think that his card art would still be active when you do this finish skill. So it's just kind of funny to me that he's basically just not included in the card anymore. I don't know why they decided to do it that way. It's very interesting, to be honest with you. But anyhow, let's actually go through these animations here. So unfortunately, that card art is so good, dude. I never thought I would gas up a Babidi card for the card art, but here we are. It's really good. Anyway, let's go ahead and move past that. So let's take a look at the 12 key. First of all, I will say I was very happy to see this. A lot of nice small movement here, obviously, with Babidi's cloak. kind of flowing in the wind there, as well, of course, Babidi's arm being lifted up there. Looks like pretty good frame rate to me, right? I guess it's a little bit choppy looking in the frame by frame here. When you're actually looking at it in full motion when he points, I think it looks pretty good in terms of how fluid it is. And then obviously we transition from a fade to white with more little movements on the cape. It's nice to see that they have that pretty much throughout. This section looks nice. I think the transition into this pose is good, and I like these sort of anime effect backgrounds, right? As well, his attack actually does look pretty cool. I will say, once it's actually on the sprite, it's a little weird, but I think that's maybe more akin to Dokkan sprites being a little bit weird, right? Because obviously for this, the way that they basically have to do it is it's just like, okay, the attack is essentially just like surrounding the enemy sprite, right? That's basically the best they can do, because how else would they do this? You know what I mean? When it comes to the sprite being there. But we have this little electricity effect, and then of course we have the card art appear on the screen. And then we have Pui Pui now arrive in a moment here. This was kind of interesting. So we have him lift up his little orb here into the sky, which also looks pretty good. Here is where Pui Pui comes in. And this is the part where I gotta say, like, everything up until this point has been kind of, it's been pretty good, right? Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with everything that we've had. I mean, funny enough, a lot of Babidi's movement is even more fluid than some, like, Dokkan Fest units that I've seen, to be honest with you. Like, his movement is really good all throughout this, right? However, yeah, Pui Pui is not cutting it, bro. I don't know what happened. Somebody at Bandai must be a Babidi fan, because as soon as Pui Pui came on the screen, the budget fell, right? So obviously we have him teleport in here, which looks fine. It is kind of a lame version of the teleport. Interestingly enough, a character that we will look at later this week, which will be the featured Ice and Nova Shinron from the Part 1 banners. His teleport is way better, instead of just literally flashing the PNG and putting some lines on the screen, because it actually has like a motion blur effect. But anyhow, so we have Pui Pui. Basically, this is such a weird transition, by the way. This really catches me off guard. So they change from scene to scene here, where they have him turn, right? This could have been a fantastic opportunity for some rotoscoping, right? They could have had Babidi fly away or something like that, and then they could have turned the camera to have it face Pui Pui from the side. I don't know why, it's just like it's such an odd cut. When you're looking at this, it almost feels like the footage skips, but that's just how it looks in the animation. So then, interestingly enough, I don't know why, for this section, they don't just have him start off here, because they don't move the background for this, which is what makes this section feel so off, right? They have it zoom in on him, and it's just bop, bop, you know? Why do they not have the background move with him if they're going to zoom in on him? Or why do they not just have him not start there and start here? I don't know. It's a very weird decision. But anyway, he basically just immediately lifts his arms up. There is one frame in between. Well, I mean, there's a lot of frames, but one pose, I guess I should say, before he actually begins to charge his attack. Definitely could use some more movement in there for sure. However, I do like the attack actually charging. I think that is pretty cool, and you know I always got to give credit where credit is due. The lighting effects in this super attack are pretty cool. You know I'm always a big fan of when Dokkan does lighting like this, because I think it always, turns out pretty good. There hasn't really been too many instances where I look at lighting effects in Dokkan on a character and I'm like, yeah, that kind of doesn't look great. So the attack then fires off at the enemy, and I mean, this is pretty basic. It's nothing special, to be honest with you. It's literally just key ball, generic explosion, and then, you know, a little explosion in the air. It's nothing crazy to write home about. It gets the job done, I suppose. It's definitely not as crazy as a lot of the other modern day explosion effects that we've seen when it comes to Dokkan animations. And by the way, hydrate or dihydrate as per usual. Alright, so this section is gas, bro, and I know for a fact one of you stinky gamers in the comment section is gonna say, oh, that's not gas, that's Babidi, because I get those comments all the time on Twitter whenever I say something is gas. Y'all are clowns, but I love you anyway. Anyhow, this section right here is a cool establishing shot where we have Babidi obviously talking to Deborah here. This is also pretty cool because this is sort of akin to what I was talking about. Actually, funny enough, I'm going to talk about this in the video, in that same video about Nova Shinron and Ice. I feel like a lot of Dokkan essays nowadays have like these establishing shots, like it's almost a intro animation within the super attack, which I think is kind of interesting. I think that's pretty cool. This shot, by the way, here, look at this zoom, dude. Woo! They were cooking with this, bro. When I saw that zoom, listen, I know for most people, this is probably like, really? You're getting excited over this? But it's so cool that they're able to make this look so good with just PNGs, right? We obviously have it begin to zoom out just a little bit in the beginning, right? And then they decide to blur the frame a little bit. So then that way, you know, when you're actually zooming out, it begins to look like you're moving away super quickly, right? You can see that the blur gets heavier and heavier until they transition into this, right? Which is obviously them very blurred out. And then, of course, it zooms out to a bigger perspective of this actual shot. Again, it's just super impressive to me that they're able to do something like this with just a couple of PNGs, right? Like, I don't even think that this is that difficult, because really all you have to do is just blur the images that you're, you know, having move across the screen. But it looks really good. I need to show you this in full motion, because in full motion, it just looks so nice. Watch this. Ready? Whoop! Such a good transition, even with the colors changing in the background, because obviously when it's zoomed in on Bobby and Deborah, you can't see all that green around them. I think it still does a good job, right? Kind of still in your mind, it makes sense going from this scene to zooming out to here, right? I just think it looks so nice, right? They definitely did an absolutely fantastic job with that. And of course, the next shot, oops, I did not mean to make it full screen. There we go. I actually fixed it just by resizing the window. Anyway, we transition from that shot, right, with, of course, the zoom out, just basically cutting back to Bobby here. And this looks so nice. I never thought I would say that about Bobby, but, man, this is a really good looking shot of Bobby. Not only is this asset super high quality, the background is a fantastic blur, right? They did a very nice job blurring the background to sort of give you this effect that like the camera is focused on Bobby and the background is out of focus, right? I think they did a really, really good job with this shot. It really is just... it's just a nice shot of Bobby, right? Like, I think the whole thing just looks nice. Obviously, we have him open his mouth as well for the voice line. Very, very nice close-up shot. This shot of Deborah as well is really, really good too. And the movement on Deborah here, I will say, is really good. When I watched this shot, I was very impressed, excuse me, with how fluid the movement was for Deborah on him just basically moving right there. Very small, but very easy and very nice looking. Unfortunately, the literal like frame after, right? Because obviously Dokkan essays like to do this. They like to have these nice close-up shots, and then they'll sometimes transition, right? You can see we have a fade to white into some lower quality assets for when the characters are actually attacking. This doesn't look too bad, but obviously you can tell that, of course, it's a little bit, you know, of a different style than the one we were just looking at. So we have him move, which, by the way, whoo, they were cooking on this too. Look at this frame. This looks so sick right here. Obviously, the way that they paint this, right, or paint this, the way that they animate this, right, is they have the speed lines, of course, just representing him moving quickly, and then to represent him actually jumping up, they have this very cool motion blur effect. Really, really like the way that they did this. I think it looks good, and of course, they actually have him move up. We have the card art then pop up on the screen for Bobby D. And we have a very nice shot of Deborah flying up here. I think that perspective looks really good with him obviously hovering in the sky. And the cape movement here is perfect, right? Just as it should be. We have a cut to the spit, which obviously turns the character to stone. And I think that that actually looks really, really nice. Of course, the close-up of Deborah looks good, but the actual anime lines in the background look nice, and the way that this is animated with the stone spit actually flying down towards the enemy actually looks really, really good, I feel. I think it's a great job of this. And what's cool, too, is that it actually does sort of take over the enemy a little bit. I'm sure that when they had this animated, right, because you can see it makes contact, and then it kind of begins to grow and sort of like take over them a little bit. They don't show the whole thing, right? But I think that it probably wouldn't work because, of course, the way that they do these sprites, it wouldn't really make sense for every single sprite. Like, obviously, if this was Hyrudigon, it wouldn't really make as much sense. So, since they do this, right, they cut away to Deborah, and this shot of Deborah looks really good with the quick smile. Definitely a very nice sort of establishing shot. We have him move forward super quickly, and first of all, I gotta say, I really, really like this, even though this is basically just a PNG sliding forward. Once we actually get here, right, this movement is so cool with the motion blur. I really, really like that. Obviously, then stopping in front of the character. This is a good way to also as well kind of mask the sprites, kind of making this like a generic character, right? I think that's definitely a good way to cover it. Obviously, for some sprites in the game, this doesn't really make sense, but for most characters who are just like a humanoid shape, obviously this will do just fine. But this is also the way Dokkan has been doing it for a while. And we do have a little bit of movement on Deborah, actually, like he's actually kind of settling in a little bit as he sort of arrives from where he was flying in, right? This shot of Deborah, which, by the way, I don't remember if it is frame for frame, but this looks almost exactly like how it did for AGL Deborah, the Battlefield one. But to be fair, Deborah obviously doesn't really have a lot of animations to work with in general, and not to mention, I mean, it's literally the same scene, so, you know, what do you expect? You know, of course, it's going to be a similar looking animation. The lighting effect on him looks really good. I like the way that the Ki Blast grows as well. We have the Ki Blast actually take over the screen, which is a fantastic transition. I love when Dokkan does this. I feel like they don't do transitions like this enough, and they have the opportunity to. Look at this. The Ki takes over the screen and transitions to the character. So nice. Obviously, we have the Ki sort of washing over the stone sprite as the screen turns to white, with a very nice KO screen with Deborah landing on the ground. Nice little recoil from the impact as well. And of course, this ends up being the KO screen. This 18 key is great, right? I really like this 18 key. I think it's a very nice animation for sure. Okay, so now we move on to the standby skill. Let me get another drink of water here. So, I will say, I do feel like Babidi looks a little bit weird here. However, it's Babidi. He's kind of a weird looking character as it is, you know, so I suppose that sort of makes sense, right? All things considered, that he would look kind of weird. I think it's also just like, considering his head is so bulbous, is that the correct term to use? I think when it's being looked at from this angle, I think it also kind of gives off the effect of looking a little bit weird for sure. We have him moving his hands around here, which looks pretty nice for sure. We cut to into the crystal ball, right, where obviously we see Vegeta inside. This is a pretty decent little transition, obviously sort of having the color be taken away from around the ball, and then of course we have the shot of Vegeta in here. This is a different asset, by the way. This is not the same as Tech Majin Vegeta, which is nice. The only thing that I've seen that I feel like may have been reused in this was the one from the AGL Deborah. Very nice shot of Babidi reaching in. I do feel like his hands also look a little bit weird here, but I mean, he's a grotesque alien creature, so of course he's going to look like that, right? We have the little beams shoot into the crystal ball, which is cool, and obviously the white light sort of envelop it. I like that they bothered to still animate him here, right? Obviously with this shot, they definitely could have just kind of let him stand still, right? But they have some very nice lighting, as the lighting's kind of like flickering over his skin, which is really, really cool. Definitely a very nice little effect, right? And obviously he has some little movement throughout this, which is nice too, because they definitely could have neglected that for sure. But then we have a very nice transition with this sort of explosion of light here. This definitely almost like catches you off guard, right? We have this very quick transition into this explosion of energy on the screen, right? Which is really, really cool. And obviously a great way to transition. You can see as well in the frames where the light isn't on the screen, right? Babidi's eyes are like, whoa! Very, very nice attention to detail. And obviously this whole shot just looks pretty good with the light exploding everywhere. And then of course we cut to Vegeta here, which I think this shot is very good, right? Obviously very anime-esque, with Vegeta kind of standing in just like this void, right, as it sort of transitions into a bigger shot of him here. When we finally arrive on this shot, I do like this zoom in, and obviously have the little right, which obviously is Babidi beginning to take over his mind. I will say, when it comes to this shot right here, right, the fly up is fine. I do think this Vegeta asset looks a little strange, right? It definitely looks a little bit weird. It is certainly not anime accurate, because I can tell you for a fact that I use this GIF to represent frustration all the time of this scene of Vegeta getting his mind taken over when he's like, ah, you know, when he's clutching his head. I use this GIF all the time, so I know this face well. However, even though it is not anime accurate, I have a feeling that because this celebration, the animations have been a lot more based off of the manga, I have a feeling that this is more akin to the style of the manga. That's also kind of how it looks to me, and it would make sense why it looks like this. So if somebody in the comment section wants to definitely, you know, back that up or you know, find somewhere else where that came from, definitely let me know, because I would be interested to know. But I have a feeling because the celebration was very manga based in terms of the animations, right? I'm pretty sure that's why it looks like this. His hair just looks really short, honestly. I don't even think his face looks that bad, right? It definitely looks a little bit weird, but I think it's honestly just the hair for me. Like, the hair is just way too short for Vegeta, right? But nonetheless, we have the screaming shot, which I think looks pretty good. I do like the movement all throughout this, right? With obviously Vegeta's body kind of pulsing. The ki wellowing up, by the way, it looks fantastic. They definitely do a good job of that. And I think it looks very much so like two, you know, sections of the aura spinning around together to then obviously, like, you know, eventually coat him in the yellow ki. I think that looks good. And this transition here is really, really good. Obviously, once he turns Super Saiyan and his hair turns yellow, right, it fades from this actual scene into the crystal ball and basically, like, perfectly transitions into the exact spot where Vegeta is on the screen and in the crystal ball. I think that's really, really cool there for sure. Nice attention to detail, by the way. I did not notice this before. You can actually see the reflection of Babidi's hands on the crystal ball. I never noticed that before. That's so cool. As well, you can also see a little bit of a glint from the light right up there on the crystal ball too. Very nice attention to detail for sure. And then we have the scene change to a yellow glow, with, of course, it now cutting to Majin Vegeta, and a very nice shot of Vegeta lifting up his head to have the Majin symbol revealed. Very, very cool. I love all of the little movement that they have in here, right? Really nice way to kind of bring this whole shot home, right? I think this is definitely so well done with Vegeta lifting his head. They have plenty of frames in here, right? Even the way that the eyes move, right? Because obviously they look up rather than sort of looking down at the ground, right? This whole shot is just very well executed. Definitely very, very nice. And a very nice close-up shot, obviously, too. All right, let's get past the card art here, and we now move on to the first animation for Majin Vegeta. Now, it's interesting, right? Because obviously this shot is literally like to a T, right? If we go back to here, let's go to this one because this is where he would actually be lifting his hands up, right? It's literally the same shot. It's kind of interesting to me that they just reused it. I mean, I don't really know what else they would have done because obviously it's, you know, like the same scene, and probably in the anime, if I had to guess, they also may have just reused the animation. But it's just so weird to see it like back to back, basically, you know what I mean? Because obviously if you use the standby skill to activate Vegeta and then you get this animation right afterward, right, then of course it's going to almost be like the same thing happening again. I don't know, just kind of weird. But anyway, of course, same thing with this section here. And now, though, we cut to the crystal ball now containing... They do change this a little bit. He does actually put his hands on the crystal ball, which is nice at least. And some very good movement on that, by the way. The way that he actually brings his arms down. I love the way that the camera zooms for this shot, too. Very, very nice. With now the ball, of course, showing Majin Vegeta. This shot also looks very, very nice, too. And we have Majin Vegeta's ki wellowing up there, which is pretty cool. I don't remember if this transitions. No, this is just a cut, which is kind of unfortunate. I would have loved to see them do like they did for this one, right? Where they transition from, you know, this to this, right? I would have loved if they would have done that for this one. However, I'm sure that the reason why they cut from this to this is probably just because, you know, that's how it is in the anime. Anyhow, this shot of Vegeta walking up into frame looks great. I love the little chunks of hair also moving there too. And the background actually begins to move as well with Vegeta walking. A very nice attention to detail. Because I feel like a lot of the times, we saw it with the 12 ki animation. Sometimes I feel like they kind of neglect to... you know, like, remember the background. They do a good job of it most of the time, but like with that, right, they definitely kind of, you know, made it a little bit weird because obviously the background was not moving. Okay, so then, interestingly enough, we have this shot, and I'm sure some of you were probably popping off when you saw this shot. Not only because this is one of the coolest scenes with Majin Vegeta for sure. I really like the very intense movement on him. He's literally rocking his head. He's literally headbanging right now. That's funny. But of course, this particular scene is basically ripped one-to-one with the support memory. And the interesting thing about that is that this is basically just a improved version of the support memory. But not only that, that also tells us that if they want to, they can literally just use support memory animations in actual cards. Because before, we were kind of thinking if a character had a support memory, right, then they wouldn't actually get that animation as a proper super attack or whatnot. And clearly, you can see here that that is not the case. So that's pretty cool that obviously when it comes to this man right here, you know, not only is he the first unit to break the mold, but then that means that we can get those support animations, excuse me, as actual animations, and they can be voiced. So that will be really cool to see. But anyway, this whole sequence obviously kind of lasts for quite a long time with it moving in on him. But once we get to this part, I think this movement is so good. It looks really, really nice. And the transition to him whipping his arms down, right, is so good with these really sick impact frames. Look at that. Dokkan is so good about the impact frames. Really, really like that. Very, very nice with Vegeta powering up. His arms wiggling in the wind and the hair moving looks fantastic. A good transition. I do kind of wish that instead of it being like this, right, where it kind of looks like it's going to fade into white, they basically just cut, right? I kind of wish it was a proper fade, but oh well, that's all right. And this shot here, ooh, this shot is very raw, if I do say so myself. We have a very nice zoom. I love the hand movement, by the way, where obviously, you know, you're sort of in the palm of Vegeta's hand. And as it moves down here, right, you can see that obviously then the shot moves back and he charges up the ki, right? Looks very nice. And I like the perspective as well with the sort of one eye peeking through the shot. The ki blast charging up looks pretty good too. I like the fact as well that you can kind of see through it a little bit. It's a lot better than, even though it is just like a circle, right, with some lines coming out of it. A lot of the time for different Kamehameha effects and stuff, they'll literally just have like a blue ball, you know, and you can't see through it and it's just kind of there. But this is cool to see that they actually add a little bit of effect where it has a little bit of transparency to it. The opacity is a little bit lower. They then cut to this shot where obviously this is Majin Vegeta blasting. You can see that this asset is a little bit of lower quality one. Kind of reminds me of that transition from the close-up shot of the Bora earlier. But yeah, we have Vegeta blast, which looks pretty good. I wish this was a little bit more than just like a stable beam, right? Because I always kind of prefer when they try and make it look like an actual like ki blast where it's energy coming out of them rather than just like a stick and a ball on a stick. But that's all right. It looks okay for what it is. And not to mention, we then have the enemy sprite get smacked up with it, right, flying into the stands. And it's interesting that obviously they then cut to the shot from the back, but I guess that makes sense because also I'm sure that Dokkan doesn't want to like show a bunch of people getting obliterated, you know. So anyway, this effect right here looks cool. I love that obviously this kind of looks like the heat from the metal melting, right, is obviously wellowing up in the back of the building here before it obviously explodes outward and the beam shoots forward. With this explosion effect and the smoke and debris actually looking fantastic for sure. Definitely very, very nice shot at the end here, and this ends up being the KO screen with it flooding the scene. It's pretty cool, I will say, that obviously the Majin Vegeta animation looks really good for this animation because, of course, right, technically the big boy animation for this unit is the one that we are going to see next, which does look really, really good, the finish skill. But it's nice to see that for the Majin Vegeta animation, they actually did make it look really, really good, and they put a lot of effort to it, you know, all things considered, obviously. With the 12 key, you know, the beginning part of it was pretty good, but then when Pui Pui appears on the screen, it's kind of like, oh. But overall, I think they definitely did a good job with the Majin Vegeta section of this. And we finally arrive at the finish skill. So this looks cool. Obviously with the little dial alerting Babidi that Majin Buu is ready to be done cooking. I like this scene too. This is a very nice shot of Babidi. I think this looks really, really good. Super high quality. He looks very funny, but I mean, again, I think he just always looks funny. His head looks super big for his body in this shot. So yeah, very nice anime speed lines. Also give you that very nice touch as well. We then, of course, cut to... Actually, it's not a cut. It's a fade, which is cool. I actually quite prefer that, honestly, because it's like a good transition between scenes. Obviously, it's not like the assets fading in between each other. It's more like the actual scenes fading between one another, which I quite like because it makes it feel more cinematic rather than just a hard cut, right? Pog bobbity, pog bobbity. This shot looks very funny for sure. And I really like this zoom out, by the way, again. For some reason, they're popping off with the zooms on this one. Like, let's actually look at this in full-time speed here. Hold on. I don't know why for this particular unit they decided to pop off with these zooms, but look at this. Yoink! Looks very nice. I definitely like that a lot. Yeah, I don't know why for this particular unit they decided to just pop off with it, but they really did. Anyway, obviously we have Deborah and Babidi looking at Majin Buu's egg here before we have the steam begin to bellow out. I do kind of wish there was a little bit more of a transition between their poses. You can see that they basically just jump from one pose to another, which is fine. Again, that's more of a thing in my mind that's like, oh, you know, it's a free-to-play unit. So, of course, you know, when it comes to that sort of thing, right? It's going to make sense that they cut corners in some areas, and sometimes the animation isn't necessarily as fluid. I feel like that's definitely sort of an effect of this being a free-to-play unit, but nonetheless, I still think that overall it looks really, really good. And we have this really cool effect on the orange where it actually looks like the light is coming out of Buu's egg, which is really, really cool. I mean, obviously anime accurate, but they do a good job of representing it here with obviously the egg glowing. I think that looks really good. I like the steam coming out as well. You can also see their capes are moving in the wind too. And then, of course, we cut to this shot here. It's kind of interesting that it goes from so dark to so light. But, of course, I think that's more so just for dramatic effect that they had the background so dark. We have the pink steam come out with some very nice dust effects on the bottom here. And, of course, this transition to Buu is very, very nice, right? With, obviously, the pink smoke transitioning to it in the sky. That looks really cool. And of course, Buu popping out. Even this looks pretty good, honestly, because obviously they basically just cut from, right, like this shot to this, but because the pink is kind of what you're focusing on, you don't really notice this jump cut as much. And of course, the pink fades away, putting Buu on the screen, which looks great with Buu hitting his signature pose here. And finally, wait, the text spins? Hold on. We need to go back to that. Do it, please. What? I've never seen that before. I don't think I've ever seen that in a super attack animation. I'm so flabbergasted right now, for real. That is so funny, dude. That's such a great way to do that for Buu, because obviously he's a character that really makes sense with, to be honest. Alright, so we have Buu land down here, which this shot is basically just a PNG of him smacking down onto the ground. So this looks pretty alright. We do have some nice landing effects, though. Obviously, even though his feet are just kind of like whatever, right? The cape does actually come down with some semblance of, you know, like feeling like it actually should be, you know, smacking down, you know, landing properly. This shot of Buu is super sick. Obviously, this is a very nice zoom in, right? And then, of course, we have a little bit of a zoom out to Buu readying his attack. I will say, I do kind of wish there was a little bit more frames in between Buu moving his face here, because I think the hands look fine, right, in the way that they move. But then Buu just kind of like... yeah, it basically just looks like they slid the PNG down and then changed it to another one. It's just a little bit goofy, if I'm being honest with you, but definitely not too bad for sure. Anyhow, obviously then after this shot, we have this cool one from the side. I like the lighting effect on Buu here too. Obviously, they do a good transition to it with these motion lines, and then of course the impact frame with the little explosion of energy too, which is nice. I like as well, again, you can actually see Buu's hand a little bit here through the energy, which is cool. Definitely very, very nice. And Buu launching this attack forward, obviously hitting the enemy. This looks great, and again, this is another shot where I feel like they totally could have skimped out on this, but they actually did animate Buu's clothes here, right, which is very nice to see in his little antenna. This impact frame also looks fantastic as well, right? Looks really, really cool, this one too. Obviously, very much so emphasizing the enemy getting hit by the attack. And of course, the blast then explodes in the sky, which this one definitely looks a lot better than the other explosion that we saw before. And obviously, the blue smoke looks pretty cool too. And that's it for this guy. I believe, yeah, that is technically the KO screen for the man. So, what do we think overall about these animations? I quite like these, actually. I think that these are pretty good. Like I said, this is a free-to-play unit, so I tend to try and tamper my expectations a little bit when it comes to the animations. But I think, honestly, some of these animations, right, are even better than some summonable units, I would argue, right? I think a lot of the shots in here are really fantastic. There is a lot of really great transitions in here between different shots. There is a ton of great different effects that they use to their advantage, like in this one, obviously the gradient, the like Gaussian blur, right, blurring the background to sort of give you an establishing shot of the character being close to the camera. Obviously the literal blur when they zoom out, right? Lots of different great techniques used in here that I honestly feel like are missing from a lot of summonable Dokkan Fest units, which is kind of interesting, honestly, that they really popped off with this unit in particular. I still find it kind of funny, the whole situation with Majin Vegeta in this animation, all things considered. But nonetheless, I think these look really good overall. Honestly, I would rate these higher, like I said, than some summonable units, and that's not even me, like, coping just because it's another Majin Vegeta card. I'm not even that big of a Majin Vegeta fan, to be honest. I like him, but I'm not, you know, I ain't no nanogenics, you know what I'm saying, when it comes to being a Majin Vegeta fan. So let me know what you think in the comment section below of this guy. Definitely, I think people have seemed to be, from what I've seen, pretty satisfied with these. I think the only thing that I've really seen as a complaint is that's kind of unfortunate is that they've used this for a free-to-play LR that is just kind of going to be alright. Obviously, right now, we don't have the Easy A for this guy, and he will definitely be much better once we actually get the Easy A proper for him. But I know that a lot of people are kind of sad that this didn't end up being a summonable unit of some kind, at least the Majin Vegeta section of this. But that is going to do it from me. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Dokkan Assets out. Peace.